The wind lashes the canvas of this tent with a relentless fury, bringing with it the merciless, icy moisture of the Danube. It is a cutting, ancestral cold that seems to ignore the campfires and penetrate directly into the marrow of my bones. I can hear the sound outside, the dark, repetitive symphony that precedes carnage, the dragging of the legionaries' heavy sandals over mud hardened by frost, the murmur of hoarse voices trying to disguise terror with humorless jokes, and above all, the sharp, metallic rasp of the whetstone against the steel of the swords. It is the sound of men preparing the tools with which they will harvest lives at dawn, or the tools they will drop when their own lives are harvested. I sit here in this crude wooden chair, lit only by the weak flame of a single candle that flickers with every gust of wind, threatening to leave me in total darkness. I look at my own hands. They are stained with ink marked by time, wrinkled and aching from sleepless nights. My joints throb, a constant reminder that time spares no one. They say I am the most powerful man in the known world, the Emperor of Rome, the ruler of lands that stretch far beyond the horizon that the eyes can reach, the master of millions of subjects, the supreme commander of the most feared legions the earth has ever seen. Yet, beneath the thick bare skins covering my shoulders tonight, I tremble with the exact same intensity as the youngest recruit, the 16-year-old boy from a distant province who cries in silence in the back of his tent, praying to gods he isn't even sure exist, begging to see his mother's face one last time. Where is my power now, in the face of nature's fury? The cold of Germania does not bow to the imperial purple. The wind does not ask permission from the Roman Senate to howl. The disease, the hunger, the exhaustion that haunt this military camp make no distinction between the general and the infantryman. What a profound and humiliating irony our existence is. We build colossal monuments. We erect marble statues to pretend we are immortal. We mint our faces onto gold coins so that future generations will speak our names. And yet, we are prisoners of the most fragile and pathetic of jails. This body of flesh, blood, and bone, a body that can be destroyed by a dull blade, by a rusted arrowhead, by a spooked horse, or even by a drop of contaminated water or a cold wind that brings the fever. We are dust and shadow. We walk the earth believing ourselves to be the masters of the universe, when we are nothing more than brief sparks, lit for a moment and quickly extinguished by eternity. The bated breath of thousands of men outside weighs on my mind. Each of them carries a private universe within himself, dreams, fears, memories of lost loves, unpaid debts, family grudges, hopes of glory. And at dawn, when the thick fog rises over the ice fields, thousands of these universes will be extinguished in an instant of brutality. Shards of metal will pierce tender flesh. Warm blood will melt the snow for a few seconds before also freezing. And life, that mysterious force that animates the clay we are, will drain into the earth, returning to the same dark abyss from which we came. Death walks among us tonight, inspecting the camp like an invisible general. She does not negotiate. She does not accept bribes in gold. She is not impressed by my titles or my crown. Tomorrow, the sword of a Marcomannic warrior may find its way to my chest, piercing the armor with the same ease with which it would tear a slave's tunic. And if that happens, what will remain? What will become of Marcus Aurelius? I will be just a piece of cold meat in the middle of the refuse of war. And the world will continue exactly as it always was. The sun will rise in the same way, indifferent to the fall of an empire or an emperor. the Danube will continue its relentless flow toward the sea, oblivious to the human blood that will stain its banks. Comprehending this does not bring me despair. On the contrary, comprehending the absolute finitude of my own flesh is the only thing that allows me to find some order at the edge of the precipice. A man's fear does not come from the fact that he will die. Death is natural as being born, growing, aging, and watching the leaves fall from the trees in autumn. No one fears the sunset, for they know it is the law of nature. Why would we fear the end of our own light? The real fear, the terror that paralyzes men and makes them act like cowardly beasts, comes from the refusal to accept this finitude. It comes from the irrational resistance against the order of the universe. We cling desperately to this rotting body and this uncertain life, as if we had made a contract with eternity the moment we were born. But we did not. Everything we were given is a loan, and the universe has the right to collect what is its own at any time without prior notice. If I accept, in the depths of my soul, that tomorrow I may not be here to see the nightfall, fear loses its strength. It evaporates like mist in the midday sun. What else can fate take from me if I have already let go of everything in my own mind? The present moment. This is the only kingdom I truly rule. The past no longer exists. It has already been swallowed by the great abyss of time. The empires of Alexander the Great, the Republic of Caesar, the majestic cities of the East, all were swallowed and turned into ruins, stories, empty echoes that the wind carries. And the future? The future is a shadow, a realm of uncertainty, governed by blind luck and the unfathomable wills of the cosmos. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. We suffer by grieving for pains that have not yet happened and that may never happen. The soldier outside, with the trembling sword in his hands, is not suffering from the pain of the enemy's blade now. The blade has not touched him yet. He is suffering from the ghost of the blade, generated by his own undisciplined mind. How many of us live like this every day? We spend our short lives terrified by financial tragedies that will never come to fruition, by illnesses we will never have, by abandonments that will never occur. We waste the vital energy of our existence fighting shadows projected by the walls of our own fear. The only real moment, the only fraction of eternity where our will has any weight, is exactly now. Therefore, I cling to the instant. I cling to the here and now. At this very moment, I am alive. I breathe the thick night air. I feel the damp smell of the earth, the smell of sweat and smoke that permeates my clothes. I feel the slight heat of the small candle flame on my face. I feel the rough texture of this parchment under my pen, while I trace these hurried letters to anchor my mind. In this moment, there is no war. There are no barbarians waiting on the other side of the plain. There are no crushing responsibilities. There is no pain. There is no glory. There is only me, my reason, and the clarity that the silence of the dawn provides. The true terror we should feel is not that of losing physical life. The gods have already determined the hour of our departure, and there is no bargain that changes the fate of a single breath. The true terror, the supreme failure of the human condition, is to reach the end of this absurd journey and realize that you never truly lived. It is to look back and see that we wasted decades being mere extras in the insignificant dramas of others. It is to recognize that we spent our entire lives paralyzed by the opinion of empty people, trapped by the chains of social approval, enslaved by the need to possess things that rust and break. To live is not just to exist. To live is to rule your own mind while the body marches toward the end. It is to choose courage over comfort, reason over despair. If death is the price of life, let it be paid with dignity. May they not find me whimpering in corners like a frightened child, but standing, conscious of my role in the universe. The noise of the swords being sharpened continues to echo through the tents. They prepare their weapons to protect their fragile bodies. I prepare my journal to shield my mind, for when the sun finally breaks the darkness of the horizon tomorrow and the true test begins, it will not be the steel of my armor that decides who I am, but the unperturbed solidity of my own reason. Hot wax overflows from the candle's edge and drips onto the rustic wood of the table, drying almost instantly at the touch of the icy air invading the tent. Under the flickering light, my eyes scan the lines of the scrolls that the messengers brought from Rome this afternoon. They are reports from spies, letters from remaining allies, and dispatches from the Senate. The words written there bring a cold much deeper and more lethal than the winds blowing from the Danube. They speak of conspiracies plotted in the shadows of marble corridors, of poisonous whispers exchanged at lavish banquets. While I bleed at the empire's borders, I read the names of those who desire my ruin, and my heart tightens, not out of fear of losing the throne, but because of the dark tragedy of human nature. Among the conspirators, I see the names of men with whom I have shared bread, generals to whom I entrusted the command of my own legions, and most bitterly, men who carry my own blood. Betrayal is an invisible dagger. It does not come from the hands of the barbarian enemy screaming on the other side of the battlefield. The enemy is honest in his hatred. Betrayal always comes accompanied by a smile, an affectionate embrace, and promises of eternal loyalty. There is an overwhelming bitterness in realizing that the kindness, justice, and forgiveness you offer the world are often returned with envy, falsehood, and brutal ingratitude. I feel the bile rise in my throat. Primitive instinct cries out for revenge, demanding that I send the Praetorian Guard to drag these men from their beds and drown their betrayal in blood. But I close my eyes, breathe deeply the frozen air, and refuse to yield to this wretched passion. Anger is the emotion of the weak, the desperate reaction of fools who still nurture the childish illusion that the world owes them justice or that people are inherently good. I write these words now, pressing the pen hard against the paper, not as the lament of a betrayed man, but as an unbreakable rule for my own sanity. A law of mental survival that I must tattoo on my soul and reread at every dawn as long as I have the privilege of breathing. Upon opening my eyes each morning, I must say to myself, even before setting my feet on the ground, today, inevitably, I will meet meddlesome, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, envious, and rude people. They will try to diminish me, try to steal my peace, and use me for their own petty ends. And why will they act this way? Because they are completely blind to the true nature of good and evil. They are sick in their souls, rotted inside, poisoned by the illusion that wealth, status, fame, and the destruction of others are the things that matter. I cannot be surprised by the malice of others. To be surprised by the betrayal of an envious man is an act of tremendous stupidity. To expect the world to be a just place, or for those close to you to be always loyal and grateful, is a terrible failure of my own reason. It is like demanding that a fig tree produce grapes, or becoming furious because winter brought frost instead of heat. It is the nature of the ignorant man to hurt others, and often, tragically, they hurt most deeply those within their own house. How many families are silent battlefields, much more destructive than these Germanic plains? I see around me patricians and Roman nobles whose lives are consumed by domestic wars. Brothers who become mortal enemies over land inheritances that, in a few decades, will belong to neither, for both will be reduced to ashes. Children who carry the crushing weight of living only to please narcissistic and authoritarian parents. Parents who see their offspring not as free human beings, but as extensions of their own failed egos. There is a false and dangerous belief among men that family and blood relations are absolute guarantees of affection, loyalty, and peace. The blood we share with our ancestors gives us biological life, but it in no way defines our character, nor does it force us to accept toxicity in silence. People carry incredibly heavy invisible chains, trying to live life according to a distorted script that society or family has drawn for them. But true peace only begins with the process of individuation. It is necessary to have the courage to separate one's own mind from the mind of the crowd and the mind of one's own tribe. The Roman emperor is not the master of his own time, for his body belongs to the duties of the empire and the people, but the mind of Marcus Aurelius belongs solely and exclusively to himself. I was not born to be a slave to the expectations of others. I was not born to please the whims of a council of flatterers, to heal the unresolved wounds of my ancestors, or to beg for crumbs of affection from those who stab me in the back. True, unshakable peace arises when the individual finally accepts being alone with their own conscience, when they stop seeking external approval like a starving beggar and become the only rigorous judge of themselves. Human ignorance is the true evil of the world, but I will not allow the malice of a sick man to change my healthy nature. If an ally lies to me, the defect is in his character. The rot is in his soul, not mine. If someone I helped my entire life turns their back on me and slanders me, the stain of dishonor covers their hands, not my spirit. Why, in the name of all the gods, should I allow the madness, envy, and immaturity of another person to disturb my inner peace? The power these people have over my feelings is only the power that I, in a moment of weakness, decide to grant them. No one can force my mind to degrade, to feel emotional pain, or to dive into hatred, unless I myself open the doors of my inner fortress and invite the poison in. Therefore, I establish now, under the flickering light of this candle, the supreme rule of my existence, the drastic and absolute separation between what is mine and what is not. What is actually under my control? Only my own thoughts, my own actions, my own judgments, and my impulses. All the rest of the universe is outside my jurisdiction. The opinion that Roman senators have of me does not belong to me and is not under my control. The gossip that spreads like a plague in the markets of Rome and in the public baths is not my responsibility. The ingratitude of a friend is not a reflection of my value. If it is not under my absolute control, then it should not be the object of my concern and should not steal a single second of my sleep. It is complete insanity to waste the vital force of your mind trying to govern the wind or trying to control what other people think or do. If someone hates me, despises me, or plans my failure, that is a problem that belongs exclusively to that person. It is they who have to sleep with the poison of hatred corroding their own entrails. My only duty, my only sacred obligation, is to ensure that I do neither say nor do anything that deserves to be despised. If the world around me goes mad and surrenders to moral barbarism, my obligation is to remain as the sole pillar of sanity, straight and standing in the rubble. People are fickle by nature. They change sides according to convenience, moved by greed and fear, the love and admiration that the crowd and false friends swear today can turn into the bitterest hatred tomorrow morning because of a simple change of thwarted interests or a malicious rumor. To anchor your own happiness, your own sense of personal worth, in the behavior of other people is a certain recipe for absolute misery. It is like building a sumptuous castle on quicksand. If your well-being depends on how your partner treats you, how your boss values you at work, or how your friends applaud you, you are not a free man. You are a slave, a prisoner chained to the unstable moods and neuroses of those who surround you. Break these chains immediately. The only approval you should seek is that of your own reason when you lay your head on the pillow at night, knowing that you acted with justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom, regardless of what the rest of the world decided to do. And what of slander? And what of those poisonous words spoken behind my back to destroy the reputation I spent decades building? What are words, after all? They are just vibrations in the air, noises emitted from the throat of a fool who will soon be dead and forgotten. If someone comes running to tell you that a man spoke ill of you, do not waste your time defending yourself tooth and nail. Do not try to justify your honor to deaf ears. Just smile and say, "He certainly does not know my other countless flaws. Otherwise, he would not have mentioned only these." One must cultivate a certain dark humor, a deep irony about one's own existence to be able to disarm the malice of others. Do not take the world so seriously. Do not take offenses so seriously. Do not take yourself so seriously. The excessive pride that makes us feel deeply offended by a verbal aggression or social rejection is the greatest of all humanity's comedies. In a few decades, in the blink of a cosmic eye, both I and my traitors will be dead. The worms will make no distinction between the flesh of the loyal emperor and the flesh of the conspiring senator. Our ashes will be mixed in the same earth, trodden indifferently by future generations, who will also suffer and die for the same foolish illusions. I fold the scrolls of betrayal and push them to the corner of the table. The poison they tried to send me had no effect, for it found a man who refuses to drink from the chalice of bitterness. The military camp plunges into a deeper silence as the night progresses. The Germanic cold and Roman malice are merely external circumstances, elements of the stage on which I was placed to perform. I no longer care about the shadows cast by men. My inner citadel remains with gates locked, its walls high and inviolable. The world outside may try to destroy me with steel swords or daggers of words, but in here, in the sanctuary of my own mind, I decide that I am unreachable, whole, and absolutely free. The silence now is almost absolute, interrupted only by the occasional crackle of wood in the few fires that still resist the dawn's frost. The tent smells of thin smoke and damp leather. I close my eyes for a moment and let the stillness of the sleeping camp wash over my mind. The weight of the imperial purple rests on my shoulders like a leaden cloak. I am the beacon to which millions of eyes turn, seeking salvation, direction, or someone to blame for their own misfortunes. The Senate demands I be a cunning diplomat. The legions demand I be a relentless general. The people of Rome demand I be an inexhaustible provider of bread and games. The expectations of the entire world collapse upon me every second. A constant, invisible avalanche trying to crush my essence, demanding that I mold myself into 1,000 different shapes to satisfy the infinite thirst of the crowd. But I refuse to be consumed. I refuse to allow my soul to be sliced and served in pieces to feed the voracious appetite of others' expectations. I write now about the most devious and invisible of slaveries, the desperate need for external approval. Most men are born free, but spend their entire lives crawling on the ground, begging for golden handcuffs, desperate for someone, anyone, to validate, praise, or accept them. The desire to belong, to be loved and respected by the tribe, is an ancient instinct, embedded in our flesh since the times when solitude meant death in the claws of beasts. But we no longer live in caves, and the opinion of society is no longer the only shield between us and annihilation. And yet, we continue to behave like frightened prey, shaping our opinions, suppressing our true thoughts, and destroying our own dreams just to avoid the discomfort of social judgment. I see men and women wasting their brief and precious lives being mere echoes of other people's wills. They choose professions they secretly loathe just to elicit a smile of approval from a stern father or a mother trying to live out her own frustrations through her children. They go into debt up to their necks, buying goods that bring them no joy, garments of ostentation, only to impress neighbors and friends who, deep down, are as empty and indebted as they are. They suffer in silence in rotting marriages or toxic work environments, swallowing daily humiliations simply because they have a morbid dread that society will point its finger and label them as failures, weirdos, or insubordinate. They become miserable actors in a play directed by people who do not even genuinely care about their happiness. What a monumental tragedy it is to hand over the keys of your own mind to the fickle whims of the crowd. Society is not a wise judge. It is a blind, chaotic animal guided by fears, passing fads, and collective ignorance. Why should I, or you, kneel before the altar of public opinion? Why should we allow people who cannot govern their own disordered desires to dictate the rules of our existence? The only true freedom lies in erecting insurmountable walls around one's own soul. I call this place the Inner Citadel. The Inner Citadel is not a physical space. It is a refuge of stone that a man builds within his own mind through the relentless discipline of reason. It is a silent and sacred sanctuary where gossip dies at the gates, where envious criticism shatters against the ramparts, and where empty praise cannot enter to inflate the ego. To build this fortress, one must make a radical and often painful decision. The decision to fire the entire world from the position of judge over your life. You must sign your own mental manumission, declaring that, from this very moment, you will no longer seek the applause of anyone, not even those you love, if their approval requires you to negotiate your values or sacrifice your sanity. Many mistake this Stoic stance for arrogance or coldness. They say, if you ignore everyone's opinion, you will become a despot or an irresponsible madman. But the truth is the exact opposite. Those who depend on applause to feel virtuous are the ones who become a walking danger, for they will do anything, even commit the greatest injustices if the crowd so demands. Breaking the dependency on external approval does not mean embracing chaos or senseless rebellion. It means replacing the chaotic tribunal of society with the most severe, precise, and just court in existence, your own conscience. When you become your own judge, the moral bar does not lower. It rises immensely. I do not need the senators of Rome or my own generals to tell me if I was just in battle or wise in the administration of the empire. I know. And more importantly, the court of my conscience knows if I acted with cowardice when no one was watching, or if I maintained my moral stance when circumstances invited me to corruption. The peace I seek is not the physical comfort of a soft bed on the Palatine, nor the shouts of the crowd cheering my triumphs in the arena. The real and unshakable peace I demand for myself is the serene silence of the mind at the moment of sleep. It is laying my head on the hard straw pillow of this tent and knowing, without a shadow of a doubt, that my actions in the closing day did not dishonor the intelligence that dwells within me, that I did not lie, that I did not manipulate to gain favors, and that I did not shrink from my duty for fear of what others might whisper about me. If you base your happiness on external evaluations, you will be cursed to live a lifetime of deep anxiety. For how can you sleep peacefully, knowing that your joy rests in the hands of distracted, unstable people who often do not even know what they themselves desire? A compliment that exalts you today can turn into the most violent slander tomorrow morning. The same mob that throws flowers at the hero entering the city is the mob that delights in throwing stones when he makes his first visible mistake and stumbles on the scaffold. And what are the insults and gossip you desperately try to protect yourself from? Imagine an insult as an arrow shot in the darkness. The foolish and envious person fires the arrow trying to cause you pain and destroy your reputation. However, the arrow has no poison and cannot even scratch the stone wall of the inner citadel. What actually causes the deep bleeding in your soul is not the arrow fired by the other. It is your own indignant reaction. It is your conscious decision to open the gates of your fortress, pick up the arrow shot into nothingness, and drive it into your own chest with the force of your own wounded ego. An insult only has power and only consumes your peace if you proudly decide to agree that it matters, or if the opinion of the one who insulted you is more important to you than your own certainty of who you are. I am frequently the target of the vilest accusations uttered by the enemies of Rome and by false allies in the Senate. They say I am too soft or too hard, that my decisions will lead the empire to ruin, that I read too much and govern too little. I listen to the words, I observe the hidden intentions in the distorted faces, but I do not give them the honor of my despair, nor the satisfaction of my wrath. Withdraw the judgment that you have been hurt, and the hurt itself vanishes. The dawn's cold tightens, a sign that the darkness is nearing its end and the imminence of battle is solidifying. It is in these liminal moments that the strength of the inner citadel must be tested. I look outside, where the shadows are beginning, very subtly, to lose their intensity. The expectation of the legions hangs in the stagnant air. They wait for the emperor to tell them what to do, to provide them with the courage they lack. But my own courage does not spring from an inexhaustible well of magic. It is sustained by this discipline I practice now, alone in the silence. I pull back my defenses, stabilize my breath, and cut, one by one, the invisible threads that tie me to the fear of judgment, the vanity of power, and the useless fragility of pride. I will not be the world's echo tomorrow. I will be the clear and resonant voice of my own rectitude. The walls are up and the gates are barred. Whatever the outside world sends against me, poison disguised as honey or lead dressed as glory, nothing shall disturb the peace and clarity of the solitary man who reigns supreme in the chambers of his own spirit. I rise from the crude wooden chair, feeling my joints protest with a dry crack, and push aside the heavy leather canvas that serves as the door to my tent. The frigid air of the Germanic dawn hits my face like the blunt blade of an axe, stealing the breath from my lungs for a fraction of a second. The contrast with the stuffy, smoky atmosphere inside is brutal. I take a few steps out, sinking my sandals into the thin snow and the frost-petrified mud, and let the immense darkness swallow the little light I left behind. The camp is submerged in a restless stupor. The fires, which were once proud flames, are now nothing more than dying embers, insignificant red dots struggling against an ocean of shadows. Thousands of men sleep around me, huddled under skins and torn blankets, and I can almost hear the collective hum of their nightmares. Each of them is locked inside his own skull, a prisoner of his fears, weeping for distant lands, trembling with dread for what the morning holds. They believe, with the absolute conviction that only human ignorance can provide, that their problems are the absolute center of all existence. But then, I look away from the ground and toward the sky. Above the black and threatening canopies of the forest's ancient pines stretches the true empire, the starry abyss, infinite, silent, and hauntingly perfect. The celestial vault opens in a spectacle of grandeur that the human mind can barely process. Millions of stars burn in the darkness, unperturbed, indifferent to the wars, the pains, and the ambitions of dust that we mortals call history. I stand there, neck tilted back, practicing the most powerful exercise philosophy has taught me. I force my mind to abandon this fragile body and rise. I rise above the imperial tent. I rise above the rows of sleeping legionaries. I rise above the dark forest, above the snowy mountains of Germania, above the Danube River that cuts through the land like a silver scar. I continue to elevate my perception until all of Europe and the entire vast Roman Empire are no larger than a dry leaf floating on a lake. From up there, from the viewpoint of the cosmos, what is the earth? A mere grain of sand suspended in the vastness of an inconceivable void. And if the entire earth is just a speck of dust swept by the winds of time, what is the powerful Roman Empire for which so much blood has been shed? The empire is but a microscopic fraction of that dust. And what am I? The Emperor of Rome, the man who holds the power of life and death over millions? I am less than an atom, an ephemeral ghost, a spark that flashes for 1,000th of a second before being eternally swallowed by absolute darkness. When you look at your own existence through this cosmic lens, an extraordinary miracle happens within your mind. Your ego is crushed into powder, and with it, all your anxiety vanishes into the air. Think, for a moment, of the absolute ridiculousness of the things that steal your sleep and destroy your peace of mind. People spend their brief and rare lives in a state of constant panic over pathetic illusions. One man suffers a mental collapse because he lost a few gold coins or because a financial investment failed. Another destroys his own health with stress because his superior at work did not grant him a title, an empty promotion, or a seat of honor at a banquet table. Women weep in despair because their clothes do not follow the fashion dictated by strangers, or because youth is fleeing from their faces. Entire families tear each other apart in courts or in bloody feuds over pieces of land, inheritances, and verbal offenses uttered decades ago. We inflate our small daily tragedies. We pump our problems with air until they become gigantic monsters that block the sunlight, preventing us from seeing anything else. But when you rise to the stars and look down, the tragic comedy of humanity reveals itself in all its misery. How is it possible for someone to lose their sanity over debts of gold, when gold is just a cold metal buried in a floating rock in the middle of nowhere? How is it possible to feel envy for another's status when, in 100 years, a blink of an eye for the universe, both you and the man you envy will be dead, rotting in the same soil, forgotten forever? All of our frenzied search for approval, all our ego battles, all the weeping over a lack of money or recognition, resemble a war fought by blind ants struggling for dominion over a single breadcrumb fallen on the ground, totally ignorant of the gigantic palace that surrounds them. The cosmic perspective is the ultimate antidote to the poison of overthinking. It does not take away your will to live. On the contrary, it takes away the crushing weight of taking life too seriously. It frees you to live with profound lightness, knowing that, in the grand scheme of all things, none of your failures have any real importance. No humiliation you suffer will leave a mark on the fabric of time. You are free. And as I observe the slow and majestic rotation of the constellations, the supreme wisdom of the Logos penetrates my understanding. The Logos is the divine intelligence, the universal reason that permeates every leaf on a tree, every drop of rain, and every heart that beats upon the face of the earth. It is the perfect law that governs the movement of the stars, the cycle of the seasons, and the relentless course of the rivers. By understanding the vastness of this system, I perceive the most destructive of all human illusions, the illusion of separation. Fear, cruelty, avarice, and hatred are all born from the same lie rooted in our weak minds, the absolute belief that I am an entity isolated from the rest of the universe, the pathetic belief that my interests are separate from the interests of nature, that I can gain something while my brother loses, that my selfish happiness can be built and maintained upon the suffering and misfortune of another human being. The truth, as clear and cutting as the cold of this Germanic night, is that separation does not exist and never has. We were all forged by the same cosmic fire, sculpted by the same chance of fate. The clay that forms my imperial flesh, dressed in the sacred purple of Rome, is the very same clay that forms the flesh of the infantry soldier trembling in the filthiest tent of this camp. And it is exactly the same matter that composes the body of the barbarian warrior painted for war, who at dawn will try to run a spear through my chest. We are all pulsing cells within a single, gigantic, living organism. Just as the right hand cannot go to war against the left hand without destroying and crippling the entire body, no man can harm another man without, at the very moment of aggression, irreparably mutilating his own soul. The individual who commits an injustice, who lies to gain an advantage in business, who robs a partner's dignity with betrayal, or who abandons his family to their fate, genuinely believes in his profound ignorance that he is being clever. He thinks he is gaining an advantage in life, that he is winning the game, but he is like a rotted tooth in a divine gear. He destroys himself by going directly against his own nature, which is essentially social, rational, and intrinsically intertwined with everything that breathes under this sky. This irrevocable consciousness of unity completely changes the way I face the blades that await us at dawn. The enemies of Rome, shouting war chants in the darkness before us, are not monstrous demons born of the shadows. They are men of flesh and blood, driven by their own terrors, fighting for their own families and ancestral lands, acting strictly according to what they believe, in their limited vision, to be right and honorable. The dark minds that conspire against me in the cellars of the Senate are not inexplicable aberrations of nature. They are merely parts of humanity blinded by boundless ambition, turned away from the light of universal reason, and lost in the labyrinth of their own egos. Forgiving them is by no means an act of weakness, softness, or cowardly submission. Forgiving them is the highest and most lucid recognition of our shared spiritual biology. I do not turn with hatred against the man who errs, just as I do not take a knife to cut off my own foot because it accidentally tripped on a hidden root. Nature placed us here to cooperate with one another. What is not good for the hive can by no means be good for the bee. I let one last gust of wind sweep across my face and hair, washing away the remaining remnants of that sterile, egocentric anxiety. I look firmly toward the eastern horizon, which for now remains as dark as pitch, but which inevitably, by the unshakable force of the cosmos, will give way to the morning light. The problems that seemed capable of crushing my chest and snapping my ribs inside that tent, the sickening worry over the political fate of the Roman Empire, the excruciating pain of the betrayal of those I called friends, the heavy apprehension about the future, and the suffocating imminence of physical pain and violent annihilation have now completely lost their terrifying density. They have been reduced to nothing. They are just small gray clouds passing quickly and without importance before an immutable and infinite sky. I am wonderfully insignificant. My passage through the earth is a breath so momentary that it is barely recorded, and there is an overwhelming, indescribable peace in fully accepting my own nullity before the silent eternity. By absolutely accepting that I am not and will never be the center of the entire universe, that my problems are nothing special, and that my story is just a drop of dew in the cosmic ocean, I gain the freedom to walk through the entire world without fear. I return to the interior of my candlelit tent, no longer as a terrified emperor worried about protecting his own pride or maintaining illusions of control, but as a peaceful and conscious fragment of the universe's reason, perfectly aligned with the grand and chaotic dance that rules creation. I am ready to play my tiny but worthy role in the merciless symphony of existence, without fear, without vanity, without the illusion of attachment, and expecting absolutely nothing in return from fate, but the silent tranquility of knowing that I have preserved my own virtue intact. The ashes in the small metal basin in front of me are almost entirely white, and the heat that once emanated from them is now only a pale memory. This is the most dangerous and honest moment of the night, the hour before dawn, when the cold reaches its climax and the darkness seems to grow denser, as if desperately resisting the light that will inevitably come. The silence of the camp has changed its tone. It is no longer the silence of deep sleep, but the strained silence of waiting. I can hear the metal of armor creaking as men move in their tents, waking to the reality that today, many of them will find their end. The weight of the imminent battle floats in the air like a suffocating mist, pressing against the chest, quickening the pulse, and trying to convince the mind that fate is a cruel executioner. How many times, on nights like this, or on days of overwhelming loss in the heart of Rome, have I caught myself wishing things were different? How many times has my mind, in a moment of weakness, begged the gods for a smoother path, for a life free of conspiracies, for a body that did not ache, and for an empire that was not constantly on the edge of the abyss. It is the most basic human desire, and at the same time, the most fatal trap for the soul. The prayer for an easy life. We spend our existence asking that difficulties do not find us, that pain ignores us, and that fate treats us with a kindness that nature never promised to anyone. But here, at the edge of the night and in the imminence of blood, I understand the definitive truth that separates the free man from the slave of circumstances. The fundamental rule governing an unshakable life is not passive resistance to what happens, but the radical and passionate acceptance of everything fate sends us. I call this amor fati, the love of fate. It is not merely about enduring what is bad, gritting your teeth and tolerating pain with bitter resignation. That is still a form of struggle against reality, and every struggle against the inevitable generates only more suffering and exhaustion. To love fate means to look at every obstacle, every tragedy, every sickness, and every betrayal, and say with all the strength of your soul, I wanted exactly this. It is to understand that everything that happens in the universe is a necessary thread in the immense and perfect tapestry of the Logos. If nature has decided that this is the moment of difficulty, then this is the perfect moment for me. Think of a fire. When a flame is weak and flickering, any breeze or handful of sand thrown upon it extinguishes it instantly. But when the fire is intense, powerful, and well-fed, it consumes absolutely everything thrown in its path. It transforms waste, rotten wood, obstacles, and even poison into fuel to shine even higher and warm with more strength. So must be the mind of the man who embraces amor fati. Your problems are not interruptions on your path. Your problems are your path. The financial loss that left you grounded, the painful end of a relationship you believed to be eternal, the medical diagnosis that brought the fear of finitude, the ingratitude of those you helped most. None of this is a divine punishment. None of it is a mistake of the universe. They are raw materials. They are the elements that fate has placed in your forge, so that you stop being a mass of soft clay and transform into a blade of tempered steel. Steel is not created in a bath of lukewarm water and soft light. It is created in the unbearable heat of the furnace and under the heavy, merciless blows of the hammer. Iron suffers on the anvil. It is crushed. It is deformed. It is pushed to the limit of its endurance. But it is only through this process of controlled violence that it gains shape, edge, and utility. Why do you believe your character would be any different? Why do you think your soul would grow in idleness, comfort, and the total absence of challenges? Suffering is not an enemy trying to destroy you. It is the most rigorous and efficient instructor you will ever have in life. It strips away illusions, burns away vanities, and leaves only what is essential, true, and indestructible within you. Stop asking for lighter burdens. Stop whimpering in corners, because life did not follow the script you drew in your limited imagination. This victim mentality is what truly kills a man, long before his heart stops beating. The man who complains about his luck is a deserter of the universe. He is like a soldier who flees the front line because he does not like the sound of trumpets or the smell of gunpowder. Complaining is a form of spiritual suicide. Instead, demand stronger shoulders of yourself. Instead of wishing the problem would disappear, wish for the wisdom to transform it into an opportunity for virtue. If you were betrayed, you now have the perfect opportunity to practice forgiveness and autonomy. If you lost everything you had, you now have the ideal setting to test whether your happiness depended on gold objects or your own inner integrity. If you are facing illness, now is the moment to show the world how a human being dies or suffers with dignity and lucidity without becoming a greedy beast. I look at my hands and imagine the tremor that many will feel when the first arrows begin to darken the sky. I do not ask the gods that the arrows do not come. I do not ask that the barbarians decide to go home and leave me in peace. I love this moment of danger, for it forces me to be everything I spent my entire life studying to be. What would courage be if there were no danger? What would justice be if there were no temptation for revenge? What would temperance be if there were no offer of excess? Virtues are like muscles that atrophy in rest and become titanic under the weight of adversity. Fate will never send you a trial that you do not have the innate capacity to endure, for you are a part of the Logos, and the universe does not desire your destruction, but your perfection through movement. The secret of inner peace is not the absence of storms, but the ability to be the still center of the hurricane. When you radically accept what happens, you strip from fate the power to hurt you. If I say yes to pain, pain loses the ability to torture me, for it becomes something I voluntarily chose for my own training. The man who loves his fate becomes invincible. He is like a perfect sphere. No matter which way you push it, it will always be upright, stable, and centered. He does not live in the if I had more money, if she had stayed, if I had had another opportunity. The if is the poison of the soul. The Stoic man lives in the is. This is what happened. This is what I have. This is what fate has given me now, and I will make of it the noblest and most beautiful thing the world has ever seen. The darkness is beginning to lighten, turning deep black into a cold, bluish gray. The moment of theory is ending, and the moment of practice approaches with giant strides. I feel an absolute calm run through my veins, a serenity born not from the hope of victory, but from the total acceptance of any outcome. If I win the battle and return to Rome, I will love that fate and use the victory to govern with more justice. If I am defeated and my body is left to rot in these God-forsaken forests, I will love that fate with the same intensity, for it will mean that I fulfilled my role until my last breath, returning the life that was lent to me at the exact moment and place that nature demanded. There is no tragedy in the life of one who understands amor fati. There are only events, and the wise man is the alchemist who transforms lead into gold, who transforms the horror of war into a lesson of serenity and the weight of suffering into a pedestal of unshakable strength. Do not look at tomorrow with anxiety, as if you were waiting for a blow. Look at tomorrow as an honored guest who brings with him the banquet of experience. Receive pain with the same respect with which you receive pleasure, for both are teachers sent by the Logos. The forge is lit, the hammer is ready, and I am not the victim of what is about to happen. I am the author of my reaction to whatever comes. Let the morning come. Let the battle come. Let fate come. I welcome it with a smile on my lips and an open heart, for nothing in the universe can happen to me that is not for the good of my soul if I know how to use it. The sound of the first trumpet tears through the heavy dawn air, a sharp metallic wail that echoes through the hills and reverberates inside my chest. The signal of the buccina is not just a warning for the legions. It is the relentless call of reality that interrupts my reflections and demands my total presence. I look at the parchment before me. The ink has already dried, and the words I wrote in the silence of the night now rest there as witnesses to a battle already fought and won in the shadows of my mind. I carefully put away the journal notes, protecting them from the moisture. They are my inner war map. But now the time for theory has ended. The pale gray light of dawn cuts through the slit of the tent, revealing dust floating in the air, and the cold gleam of my armor on its wooden stand. It is in this moment, when the body cries out for another hour of rest and bones ache from the accumulated cold, that true philosophy is tested. I hear the murmur of my own mind trying to seduce me with reasonable excuses. "You are an old man," it whispers. "You worked through the night. You deserve the comfort of bearskins for a few more minutes. Let the generals begin the preparations." But I rise immediately, granting no room for debate. If I am unable to overcome laziness and the desire for comfort in the secret of my own tent, how can I lead an empire through the flames of war? Many ask me, or ask themselves, why we must rise every day to face a world that seems increasingly chaotic, unjust, and exhausting. Why keep fighting if pain is constant and gratitude is rare? The answer is simple. and, at the same time, overwhelming, because you are waking up to do the work of a human being. Look around you, beyond the intrigues and petty problems, the plants, the birds, the ants, and the bees. Each small part of the universe fulfills its specific function, contributing to the order of the whole with silent and absolute dedication. Why do you, a being endowed with reason and consciousness, believe you have the right to be the only exception in nature? You were not created to hide under the covers and seek passive pleasure. You were forged for action, for duty, and for social utility. The discipline of action does not depend on how you feel. If you wait for the moment you are motivated or inspired to fulfill your obligations, you will be a slave to your fickle emotions. An upright man acts because it is what must be done, not because he feels like doing it. Honor lies not in the final result of the battle, nor in the applause that follows, but in the integrity with which you lace your sandals and face the day. Each task, no matter how repetitive or insignificant it may seem, whether governing an empire, caring for your home, or performing manual labor, must be executed as if it were the last and most important action of your life, without haste, without complaint, without looking aside for shortcuts. I begin to put on my armor. The leather is cold and the metal is heavy, a physical reminder of the responsibility I have assumed before the Logos and before the people. Each piece I buckle is a symbol of the mental preparation that must precede the encounter with the world. Just as I protect my chest against spears, I protect my soul against the insults, the malice, and the frustrations I will encounter out there. Putting on the armor is a ritual of transformation. I leave behind the philosopher who questions and assume the emperor who decides. The mistake of most men is believing that victory consists of defeating an external enemy, accumulating wealth, or subjugating territories. They spend their entire lives in a frenzied search for control over others, while remaining wretched servants of their own appetites and fears. But I tell you, the only victory that truly matters, the only one that time cannot erase, is absolute mastery over oneself. To overcome the will to complain, to overcome the fear of pain, to overcome the vanity of wanting to be admired, this is the supreme conquest. If you can make it through this day without betraying your own conscience, if you can be just to those who were unjust to you and maintain your calm while the world around you falls apart, then you have already triumphed, regardless of what happens on the battlefield. The chaos of the external world is inevitable. There will always be wars, crises, betrayals, and losses. Trying to control fate is like trying to hold the water of the Danube with bare hands. However, your behavior in the face of this chaos is entirely yours. You are the captain of your judgment. If circumstances are difficult, give thanks for the opportunity to be an example of resilience. If exhaustion is extreme, rejoice in knowing that your body is being used for a noble purpose. Unshakable action is the love of duty in motion. I open the tent canvas and step out into the sunlight that now begins to set the treetops ablaze. The camp is in full motion. Thousands of eyes turn toward me, seeking the command signal. I feel the weight of each of those gazes, but I do not feel crushed. The solitude of power does not frighten me, for I have discovered that I am never alone as long as I am in harmony with my own reason. Today's work will be hard. There will be blood, there will be sweat, and there will be tears. Many of us will not see the sunset. But this is no reason for hesitation. The time given to us is short, and what we do with it is the only thing that defines us. Do not waste any more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Do not wait for ideal conditions to act with honor. Honor is what creates ideal conditions. I walk toward my horse with firm steps. The cold still bites the skin, but my inner citadel is warmed by the flame of determination. I accept my role. I accept my fate, and I will act with all the strength and rectitude that the universe has granted me, from the first to the last breath of this day. The call of duty has been made. The answer will not come from words written on paper, but from the steel of my will and the clarity of my actions. Let the works of a human being begin.